Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our first session of the Horticulture Leaders Forum. It's great to see so many of you, and thank you all for taking time out to join us in what seems to be such a busy season. I'm going to hand over to Ian in a second, but we'll just go through a couple of housekeeping rules to start with. The usual if you've joined one of our webinars previously. So down at the bottom, you'll see there's a chat function. If you hover over that and click on that, that opens up the chat function. If you could put any questions in there. We've had a couple of questions come in advance, so that's fantastic, but please do use that facility and put questions in there. We'll save the question and answer session for the end because we've got quite a lot to get through in the hour. The session is recorded. If anybody has a problem with that, you can turn off your video or change your name if you want to, or contact me direct if you don't want it recorded. But what we do is we put it onto the Knowledge Hub in the next couple of days, so it's really useful for people who haven't been able to attend the session. And I think that's about it. So we can hear somebody in the background, but I think everybody's muted. So I think I'll hand over to Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Pranav Dar, and good afternoon. Welcome everyone. Yeah, just to start off by explaining about the panel debate today. It's the opening event of Tyfu Cymru's new Leaders Forum that basically consists of a series of monthly online masterclasses and expert panel sessions for commercial growers in Wales. And so, you know, we're encouraging you to stay involved with the forum and participate as much as you can in the months ahead. And I think, you know, it'd be an opportunity for you to perhaps take advantage of the training and mentoring that's on offer through our experienced panelists and business coaches. So we'll be in touch about all that after today's session. Okay, so without sort of further ado, I'm delighted to be joined by our three panelists, and I'll introduce them one by one. Andrew Burgess is director and owner of Produce World and founder of RB Organic. They are a family business that started in 1898 and now one of the largest vegetable growers in Europe. Adam Dixon is co-founder of Phytoponics, and since 2016 Adam's raised over 1 million in investment for a deep water culture hydroponic technology, and now has projects underway with major growers and fresh produce sector partners across the world. And last but certainly not least, Neil Alcock, director of Seant Nurseries. Seant were established in 1979 and supply 850,000 liners and 400,000 plugs every year to wholesalers and supermarkets from their 12 acres of land in Carnarvon, which is quite impressive. And Seant also have a cash and carry outlet in Cheshire. And I must say, I'm really looking forward to finding out about your experiences of leading commercial horticulture businesses. So many thanks, guys, for giving up your time to join us today. As Sarah has mentioned, we'd like you to, our audience, we'd like you to participate as much as possible. So please post any questions you have into the chat box, and we'll pick up on as many of them as we can at the end of the session. I guess if we get lots and lots of questions that we can't cover off in the hour that we've got today, then we can maybe follow up with Andrew, Adam and Neil afterwards and perhaps do that over email. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that running a business is rarely a straightforward journey. And certainly the last 12 months or so have perhaps been more challenging than most for all of us. And I think, you know, all of us in businesses really can take pride in the resilience that we've shown to survive through this period of uncertainty. And really that's where I'd like to sort of begin the discussion really by asking the panelists, you know, what are your sort of proudest achievements in business? And I wondered if I could pass over to invite Andrew to if you'd be happy to sort of go on that one first, please.
Well, I've been in the business 34 years now. I've got many proud moments. So just having to think about over the time, I was 21 years old when I started properly in the business, and it was a relatively small but old family business. And I had a good start in life, well educated, and a decent capital base to start up with. But I came into the business as a very energetic and ambitious young man. The business was about 1.5 million of sales in those days. And through innovation and hard work and attention to detail, we grew that to 100 million within 10 years of me starting. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that was led by innovation, and I think innovation is a key theme you'll hear from me today, and probably even more from Adam, probably. But that definitely put us on the map, being the first to do several things. We eventually grew the business to 250 million. We made a large acquisition which went very badly wrong for us, which brought the business back down to 100 million. And I think that's also one of my proudest moments, is that we saved the business and we paid everybody, and the business has now gone from strength to strength since then. And the most recent thing that I'm very proud of is the fact that I'm now becoming more of an investor and a leader and less of a doer. And I'm very proud of the young team that I've developed who now run the business for me. So probably of all of those things, probably the young team that now runs a business are my proudest things.
That's a fantastic story to open with, Andrew. Thanks very much for that. And it shows, and one thing, it sort of shows obviously an evolution of the business, and then sort of, the succession plan for that as well, in terms of the young team that's coming through. So I think there's some really good points there straight away that we can perhaps focus in on. Adam, could I pass to you to pick up on some of your proudest achievements in business? And yeah, by all means, give us a little bit more background about the business, about your business, and so on as you go, because my introduction might not have given you as much credit as you perhaps deserve.
Thanks, Ian. And interesting, very inspiring story, Andrew. So phytoponics. So I'm currently, I'm 28 now, 29 in next month, actually. So I'm a bit sort of an early stage in the sort of business. So phytoponics, it's deep water culture hydroponics, and it sort of came from me tinkering around growing lots of different crops, especially exotic plants in my sort of home and stuff. Growing up, everything was just exotic fruit and flowers and stuff. Then when I studied engineering, I started to learn about, started to develop a creativity for thinking about ways to make things cheaper, or lower cost. So I saw an opportunity to make a new type of deep water culture hydroponic growing system. And hydroponics is basically growing plants in a nutrient solution. And the key innovations, it's quite a few, but I think the proudest thing was basically going from a hobby and a sort of sciencey type background, and then getting my hands dirty and meeting with some very talented and authoritative people in the commercial horticulture sector. The people that grow the actual food, run the businesses, run the teams, sell the produce. It's commercial horticulture is actually extremely complicated, because you got to match up so many things. There is the science and agronomy side, but at the end of the day, it's about making money and running an operation. I think the proudest achievement was getting up to speed with commercial horticulture and raising investment, but then sort of enjoying the fruit of my initial passion, which was successfully growing dragon fruit in my system, which fruited for the first time last year, but this year it's fruited like mad. It's got 40 or so fruits on it. And that's where the initial passion about growing exotic food, after going on holiday in Singapore and Vietnam, combined with the technology of the hydroponics to grow, an orchid cactus and make it fruit in the UK. is, well, that's just like a personal one. But along the way, I've had some some achievements with recognition as United Nations Young Champion of the Earth, and raising investment. But the journey's still to there's a lot more to come because I'm at the early stage on the journey.
Thank you, Adam. That's really good. I mean, I'm glad you threw in the modestly threw in the that you were awarded United Nations Young Champion of the Earth a few years ago. Because I mean, crikey, that is some accolade. Funnily enough, I should say that I first came across Adam. You were on a San Miguel advert, strangely enough, about some entrepreneurial work you were doing through the stuff you just described. I think it's a really interesting story, and very modestly put, if you don't mind me saying. But certainly the sense of innovation is coming through with both from what Andrew and yourself have said. So that's really good, and some interesting themes coming up. Neil, could I put the same question to you? What are your proudest achievements in business? You're on mute, Neil.
Yeah, I started here at Seance this week, 34 years ago. 17-year-old trainee with the YTS. At the time, it was a very small grower retailer, so we grew our young plants and retailed them. But quite quickly, we managed to develop the wholesale side. It's quite a successful young plant unit that we quickly began to sell to some of the biggest growers in the UK. To the point that in 2015, we were actually bought by our biggest customer at the time. So for me, that's quite a proud moment where you recognise as a business with your team to come valuable to another part of another group of companies. And in recent years, we've grown the company by over 30%. And that's largely down to the team we've got here and all our personal ambitions, really. So, yeah, we're pretty proud of what we've done so far. And we've got a long way to go yet.
That's great, Neil. Thanks very much for that. Again, I think something that sort of, some common themes coming out there in terms of strength of the team and the ambition, and I guess in a way the sort of vision and the plans for moving forward. And so I'm going to sort of jump around a little bit with the questions that I'm going to put forward. But I want to sort of move more towards this point about innovation and about planning. And I guess I mean the last few years, if nothing else, have perhaps shown how difficult it can be to sort of forecast the future with absolute certainty. But nevertheless, planning, of course, is important to business and business development and business growth and so on. So I guess a question really that I think might be useful for the guys in the audience to know is sort of how far in advance do you make plans, generally speaking, and sort of what are the opportunities and perhaps challenges that you sort of see in the sector? And then kind of what sort of innovative steps are you sort of taking towards that? So it's quite a big question. So it's kind of about how far in advance you think about these things. What are your views in terms of what's coming on the future horizon, and what are you doing about that? Maybe Neil, could I pick up with you and continue on where you left off, please? Yeah,
at the moment, so we're planning in terms of production sales. We're planning 2 to 3 years ahead. And at the moment, we're seeing that this year we've got a growth of 30%. And then for the next 3 years, growth of 10%. So we tend to have little jumps and then steady periods after that. There are opportunities to increase that, but we try and keep it within our means and within our reach. We do have longer term plans. That tends to be plans around capital expenditure, new structures, and new contract growers being added to our group. But the real planning is like 2 years ahead, and that's in terms of sales and production. Because in our sector, and the past 18 months, we look at what's happened there. We've had to adapt very quickly to a couple of situations with the pandemic and with Brexit. So you have to be very able to adapt very quickly to your marketplace and what's going on there.
That's great, thanks, Neil. I'm glad you mentioned Brexit and not me, because I probably get shot for saying things like that. But trying to avoid that word like the plague. But anyway, maybe could I invite Andrew to say a few words about that, just to sort of remind you that, in terms of how far ahead do you sort of make plans, what opportunities and challenges you see for the sector, and perhaps in what ways you're preparing or innovating around those things.
Yeah, well, we're planning in the business on many different time scenarios from tomorrow up to 10 years ahead. And obviously, we're harvesting 365 days a year, delivering to all of our customers. And that tends to work on a fairly short planning cycle. And we have, dedicated operations planners in the business to do that job. Crop planning is running around 2 years ahead. So, in June, we'll be planning land for next season's cropping, which will take us through to May, June 2023. The crop we're planting now will take us through to this time next year. CapEx wise, we tend to work in about 5-year cycles. So there's lots of planning on lots of different levels. One of the things that I love as I've grown up and matured and got a young team doing the day-to-day for me is horizon scanning. And I'm very keen on investing in stuff. And some of that is, I don't know how far in the future, but I have a real interest in biology and biological solutions, hence my organic interest. So looking at things like beneficial fungi, predatory insects, how to use them in fields, that sort of stuff, which we are doing some stuff on the farm now, but some of the beneficial fungi stuff is probably 10 years from commercialization. By the time you've developed a product, registered it, got it accepted and widely used. So, we do think in long time scales. And I think you need all of those planning horizons to make a business work properly.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's interesting. And I guess, as you've seen the business grow, there's different levels of complexities based on scale. And I guess different levels of risks that you can take and perhaps afford to take with regards to how far in advance you can look and scan and invest in.
100% right. When I was a young man, I was very focused on what happened tomorrow. As I've grown older, I've looked further and further ahead. And as you said, I've got the comfort of having a bit behind me where I can actually think about some of the real long-term challenges and invest in them. Because, innovation does cost money. Because, 9 out of 10 ideas don't work. So, but they still cost money. So, there is a cost to innovation, but it is also a very important investment to make.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really interesting. Really, really good sort of focus in terms of your business and at that scale. I think there's some really good lessons learned that we can sort of pull out of that. Adam, I'm going to pass over to a young man that Andrew just sort of said he used to be, and maybe have you got any sort of points of words of wisdom with regards to planning ahead and any opportunities and challenges that you see, and obviously being an innovator in your field, I'm assuming this is a rich terrain for you.
Sure, thanks. So like Phytoponics, we're a technology company, and we're reliant on investment capital to develop the technology to commercialization, and it's a bit different to a normal business where you're relying mostly on revenue. So the sort of strategy that we plan is more for like a 1 to 2 year sort of time scale for the product and sort of early commercial projects, and getting the supply chain and getting things ready so that we can sort of rapidly grow commercially after a certain critical mass. So the key thing is getting the critical mass within a sort of runway of capital. So in terms of the opportunity, I see 40 years out of all the R&D, with the sort of new crops, new crop breeding, different ways to different agronomic techniques, energy efficiency, and different forms of product for hydroponics. The key thing is getting the initial revenue and getting the first sort of product stream up and going for us. And it's a bit of a culture change because we're coming to growers who've been growing for decades sometimes, and telling them about a new way of growing, and and the trials we have take years, take many months as well. For example, tomato, 11-year crop. So that's why we're planning sort of 1 to 2 years, but they have to rely on intuition and fitting things together, so that they're ready for like fitting ideas together, so that even though we're focusing on the main sort of part of the innovation, product development, that we're able to do things in the future to maximize the full potential. And in terms of the sector, I think, with Brexit and sort of climate change and like localization and like sustainable heating and stuff, I think protected horticulture, I think in general is going to, will be a big sort of growth area. And in terms of sustainability, I think, a lot of the practices we used to do in agriculture in general, there's a big drive to sustainability. So I see a big opportunity in sort of meeting the same standards or increasing sort of productivity using less resources. Many ways to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it kind of nicely brings me on to the next point, to be honest, about sustainability. And I know obviously from what I know about your background, Adam, and also Andrew, who I met a number of years ago at a sustainability focused conference, and I know through some of the work I understand that Neil's involved with, it's sustainability is something that we increasingly hear about. And I know, you guys perhaps have a passion for this sort of stuff, and maybe horticulture is seen as perhaps a less a lower impact method of agriculture compared to sort of maybe more conventional forms of land use and so on. But I mean, whether it's issues such as single-use plastic, peat-free growing, water, energy efficiency, diesel use, and so on. Do you guys see sustainability as an opportunity or a threat to your industry? And what sort of steps are you taking towards achieving sustainability? Maybe Adam, could you pick up on that, because you were kind of touching on these points there before I sort of interrupted you. So we'll maybe continue on where you left off.
Sure. So the entire premise of phytoponics is to develop sustainable, efficient technology. And the primary way, primary focus on sustainability is replacing peat and replacing substrate. So we have a very recyclable and inert liner, which basically holds water and allows aeration, so that there's no substrate needed apart from a small plug that the transplant comes in usually. And that's an example where you can save hundreds of tons of peat or rock wool or coir for a multiple hectare scale farm. And in terms of water sustainability, you've got a closed loop hydroponic system, so water is only used by the plant. And it has a really good application to sort of arid areas as well. So we've got a project in Saudi Arabia. I think it's called Saudi now officially. And then in terms of like opportunity, I think heating costs in protected horticulture are massive. So a next stage of innovation is very much focused around replacing whole greenhouse heating and with localized crop heating from within our system, by recirculating heated solutions. So these are all opportunities which can be cost reducing opportunities and very commercially attractive as well.
That's great, thanks. So you touch on, interesting, you touch on some natural resources that obviously are fundamental to horticulture, things like you mentioned peat and substrate replacement, things like obviously use of water and energy and so on. So you touch on those quite big, I guess big inputs that are required. So that's really interesting. Andrew, could I bring you in on the conversation on that, on the sustainability side? Do you see it as an opportunity or a threat to the industry, and any steps you're taking towards sustainability?
Well, I think in field scale veg, I'm an outdoors grower, not an indoors grower, so my list of things is very different from Adam's. I think it's been a competitive area for many years actually, but quite quietly and in the background. I mean, I've been under pressure from Waitrose for 30 years to reduce pesticide use and tell a good story about how we run the farm, etc., which is all sustainability. I think the accelerometer is now in the red. I think it's now the red hot issue in food. Vegetables actually score very well compared to a lot of products, and there'll be some livestock farmers probably who are wishing they'd never heard about sustainability. But for us, it's a huge part of our business. It's what originally drove me into getting interested in organic. Even though actually, I mean, to tell a little war story, I was a very reluctant entrant into the organic market originally. I was actually told to do it under threat of losing my conventional business by a supermarket buyer in 1996. But I've really grown into it and grown to love it and learned a lot from it and transferred a lot from organic into conventional growing. But I think what's becoming clear is this is really now really high on supermarket agendas. What they're struggling to do is find a way of telling a story and marketing the benefits of what we're doing. And so what we're starting to see is a lot more data measurement coming into the business in terms of carbon, biodiversity, reducing inputs, chemicals, fertilizers, energy, and actually trying to put a score to that and tell a story about that. And food waste as well is a huge issue. And in my part of the supply chain, that's all about growing better crops with less waste in them, but also utilising those byproducts into other co-products, which all helps decrease the carbon footprint, energy footprint of the products we're doing. But I think we're pretty well placed really in fresh produce. We don't have the consumer pressures against us like some of the meat boys do. So I think it's definitely an opportunity.
That's great. And Andrew, can I just, while you're on the subject, can I just ask, in terms of those measures you mentioned, things like carbon and biodiversity and so on, are you actively taking steps to measure those impacts then, or is it something that you kind of work towards practically?
No, we've commissioned somebody to measure our carbon footprint on the farm. We've started capturing lots of data. We're actually just working through the 2020. Our crop doesn't follow a calendar year, as you all know, but our 2020 cropping, which we are just finishing now, we're close to having measurements on that, and we're starting to measure more and more of the biodiversity stuff on the farm as well. But that has to be done through sampling. So yeah, we are trying to put together stories, and our customers are A, very interested in this, and B, really pushing us hard to come up with measurements. And the carbon one's really interesting because there's hundreds of companies offering to measure your carbon now. But what's really important to us in an organic system in particular, but I would say in any overall farming system, is we've got to measure sequestration as well as outputs, because some of the stuff we're doing is capturing loads of carbon. And I think the story we want to tell is that our carrots, for instance, come from a carbon neutral farming estate or farming system. Because I don't think some of the crops will always have a carbon cost, but within the whole system, they won't have, if you understand what I'm saying. So I think it's important. This carbon sequestration part of the measurement is really important.
So methods of absorbing carbon and having a positive sort of impact on the environment, as well as those sort of negative issues that we hear about.
So having mixed enterprises on the farm, using organic manures, including your woodlands and hedgerows and things into your measurements, how you manage those. I think that's all part of the story that we need to measure.
That's really interesting, Andrew. Thank you for that. And I think one of the points that I pick up from that is you mentioned about the story and the fact that your customers are interested in that sort of almost that narrative which sits behind the brand, so to speak. So that I think that's all I think really useful and good advice. I think, and I'll bring you in a moment, Neil. But I think that I guess one of the things that smaller horticulture businesses in Wales can do and can take advantage of, if you like, is the fact that they can adapt to change quite quickly, and their impacts are relatively low in comparison to, like I say, other forms of agriculture. And so maybe trying to capture that somehow, put practical steps in place, and maybe communicate that narrative has got to be to be a kind of commercial advantage to them then. Just
to say, and I think the story is a really important part of a business. And I would encourage everybody who's listening to really start telling your story. Tell it to your friends, tell it to your family, and really hone it. And make sure it stands up to scrutiny, because that's the key marketing tool that you have, is the ability to tell your story. And you know, I've only got 6 customers. They've got 70 million customers. Now, my frustration is I can tell my story really well to those 6 customers, but I get really frustrated that they don't tell it well enough to their consumers. And you know, I do supermarket private label, and it's my longest running frustration is that we fail to tell the story of how we do our farming to our consumers.
Yeah, that's I think there's a good lesson and a good point made there, and it'd be interesting to understand, you know, any steps you are looking to take, kind of sort of improve on that. Neil, I'm going to pass over to you because you've been sat there very patiently waiting. Right. I know through my conversations with Sarah at Tyfu Cymru that you're doing some interesting stuff and some practical steps with regards to things like single-use packaging and peat-free growing and this sort of stuff. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about the sort of practical steps you're taking and maybe how it relates to what Adam and Andrew have mentioned. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, in our sector, I think peat use is a single biggest issue with regards to sustainability. We actually went largely peat-free over 10 years ago. So we were the first sort of business in, you know, ornamental horticulture of our kind in the UK to do so. When you pioneer ideas, it comes at a cost, so you pay a lot more for it, and it both in the product and your learning curve, but you gain the experience quicker when you know deadlines will loom sometime in the future. And more recently, you know, DEFRA have now stepped up to actually ban the use of peat in horticulture. I mean, for garden centres or consumer use by 2024 now, I think. And for the likes of us, it's looking to be like 2028 with a use update by 2030. So it doesn't worry us in that respect. I mean, we're 97% peat free at the moment. So we just have 3% peat within our production. That's just for a few individual lines. And the fact of the matter is we'll probably drop those lines in the future. That's the only way we could become peat free. So I think you'll see a change in what has grown, what is available, but it is possible. Some of the biggest issues coming from is with the dialogue I'm having with DEFRA. There is a very big gap in the availability of materials to replace peat. At the moment, I think last year the UK professional horticulture used 2.5 million cubic metres of peat, and that is not available out there in forms of, you know, forest waste, wood fibre, and coir. I mean, coir itself is one of the biggest constituents in peat-free growing media, and that itself, you know, has its implications with the distance it travels, and how it's processed in its locality. So, but you know, that said, we're ready to go peat-free by 2024 here in Seance. Added to that, we've again for many years we've had integrated pest management in place. So we use cultural methods first, biological second, and only where we really need to have soft chemicals or chemicals. But most chemicals that we're using now, you can see in the future, they won't regain registration. So we have to basically embrace the new methods of growing to learn to grow without the use of these chemicals. But as a business, yeah, we're pretty efficient with our approach to peat-free growing and chemical-free growing. What we don't do at the moment, we don't measure our carbon footprints. We do have mother plants in countries around the equator, like Costa Rica, Colombia, Israel, Uganda. This is where mother plants grown in very warm climates, but they are shipped in very large shipping routes. So we tag onto that, and that sort of replaces us having to grow plants here under heat and lights here, where we would burn a lot of electric or fuel. But that said, so we're pretty happy where we are, so with peat use anyway. Yeah, that's where we are now.
That's really interesting, Neil. I mean, that's, again, just picking up on some of the points I raised earlier, that in itself is a really good story, isn't it? So can I ask, do you communicate that with your customers at all, and do they take up on that and sort of buy into that sort of philosophy, if you like, as well?
Yeah, our customers are plant finishers who finish plants for the retail supply chain. If I'm brutally honest, all we've ever been, by being peat-free, we've been a tick box for their environmental policies. There's been no real advantage, no commercial advantage to us growing peat-free. It doesn't give our product any more value, and there's no demand by the consumer for that at the moment. I think education or legislation will actually change that. But no, peat-free use hasn't been driven by consumer demands or grower demands. It's by the lobby groups like the WWF and the carbon groups associated with that. But no, that's what's happened there.
Thanks, Neil. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Just briefly, it's tricky with peat, because peat's actually a bit of like a super thing, because it's not just a soil and something that holds the roots. It actually contains a lot of antifungal stuff from the mosses that they're in bogs. Bogs get, moss gets soggy in bogs, and they emit stuff to stop rotting. So like, it just raises the difficulty, because the performance is a bit less. I used to have to use peat a lot with carnivorous plants growing up as a sort of ornamental type thing. But a peat replacement has to also, it benefits having like an antifungal element to it, like a natural one as well.
Okay, so there's some innate properties there that are kind of, they're sort of difficult to replicate, I guess.
Some of the our compost creates two types of bark, and actually bark on a tree is actually there to protect the tree from pathogens. So there is evidence to say that certain barks will prevent fungal pathogens as well. But that's something we're looking into at the moment.
Very good.
Really interesting, guys. Thank you for those comments. So I'm going to sort of change perhaps the nature of the questions for a moment. One of the things that I guess that's kind of come out as a theme, I think, across the listen to three of you talking about your experiences, and how I would translate that is, running a business can perhaps be, rewarding, but it can also be very challenging on times. And in a way, I think, particularly for smaller companies, it can be quite a lonely pursuit. I'm just wondering who your peers are and where you might go for advice, and whether mentors, for example, have been important to you, and how much value you would place on that. Because obviously we're not going to be offering mentoring through the Leaders Forum, so I think it's an opportunity for the guys in the room, so to speak, to kind of understand a little bit more about the value of that potentially. Andrew, could I pass to you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So very important to know your peers, to know your competitors. Mentors and leadership support and coaching have all been very important in my career and my business's career. As I said, when I joined the business, it was a small business, and I did just about everything from invoicing to plant maintenance to working on the bagging machine and answering the phone and everything. As the business grew, I've got two brothers, by the way, we all work together. We found that we needed somebody to actually mentor us and help us with strategic direction, and also to try and separate management from ownership. Because you sometimes need to de-emotionalize situations to make better judgments. And we employed our first non-family chairman in 1997. And I can remember this guy. He walked into the room, he had a pinstripe suit, and he had hair almost as good as Ian's. And
not quite as good, surely, Andrew.
And he stood in front of us and he said, you guys know everything about your growing, your industry. He said, but I'm going to turn you into £100 million business, and I'm going to charge you £1,000 a day. And we all went, bloody hell, £1,000 a day. He scared the life out of us, this guy did, but we took him on. And he helped us and shaped us and gave us confidence. And we did what he said and surpassed that too. So, you know, I think getting a bit of perspective, somebody with a slightly less emotional attachment to your history and your journey is a really, really good thing. I think there's business coaching, which is about bringing the best out of you and your team. There's business mentoring, which probably implies a little bit more technical expertise and to actually helping you tell you what to do. And then there's business support, which is just somebody to keep you honest and just support you if things are going badly and to keep your feet on the ground when they're going really well. A really, really good friend to have is Rudyard Kipling's 6 Honest Men. So always ask yourself the open questions that begin with who, why, what, where, how, and when. Because if you answer those questions honestly, they will guide you.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really, really good. Sounds like the dog in the background enjoyed that as well. Neil, could I bring you in on that one?
I've had a look in the system, and it's down as your address, but I know
where do you go for advice? Who are your peers? And sort of how important do you feel mentors are?
Yeah, traditionally, our peers really have. I've always gone to people in the industry who I've always respected, who've led before me. Quite often they're competitors, as well as customers. We've quite often sat on committees with competitors. Often you have the commercial confidentiality, but you compare and contrast ideas, what you're doing, and you learn from each other. So I've always found that invaluable. We also have a bit of official advice from companies like ADAS, and we have business advice from the NFU as well. So we use that where needed. But I always find on my level and in my particular trade, it's your colleagues, but be they customers or competitors, they're the ones to go to and talk with you about advice. So yeah.
Great, thank you. It's, I think sort of contrasting those 2 points from yourself and Andrew, perhaps having that sort of independent, non-emotional bond, as you said, is probably quite useful there. And I imagine, that would perhaps come from those stakeholders that you mentioned, Neil.
Mm.
Adam, would you like to come in on that in terms of peers and where you go for advice and how useful and important mentors have been to you? Sure.
So, as a young person starting out in business, mentorship's key. I've had many different types of mentors for different things. You've always got to remember, you've got to make your own decision and trust your own intuition. But keep open to as much diverse advice, because the value in people's experience and perspective and expertise is, when deployed right, is truly, can really accelerate things. For example, one of the best mentors I had was a guy, Graham Dunley, and he was a Yorkshire man. He was a traditional man, and he was a very bit of an innovator quite a big innovator in hydroponics himself. And yeah, he's about 70 or something, 65. And he basically turned me from like a sort of naive, hobbyist type person in growing into like someone who can, talk with growers and, grow things reasonably well, not as well as a grower that, has been honing it, perfecting it over 10 years or decades. But yeah, it was that perspective which really enabled me to design the technology for a commercial environment and make it work. So I think, mentorship is good. It's very key. You also got to know when to see bad advice as well as good advice. And I guess you got to choose the right advisors and mentors and support for the stage you're at. So, for example, now it's our focus now is getting revenue established, getting those commercial opportunities. So One of our close partners, a guy called Victor, is a very wise man in the horticulture field, and he's been invaluable in sort of sense checking and like guiding on like those relationship developments and sort of the sense of commercial opportunity. And then there's also partners. We've got some great partners as well. For example, we've got Total World Fresh. We've got Stockbridge Technology Centre. So it's really good to have the right partners and people around you. As an R&D company, of course, there's specialists I can talk to and just bounce stuff off. The more people you can be open with and sort of trust and communicate openly with and rapidly learn stuff, and be open to like bad news or difficult advice that requires a restructuring of thoughts and things. Those help me grow, I think. But I'm at this stage of my journey, so we'll see.
No, thanks, Adam. I think it's really good, and I think some of the words that come through and probably across through there probably replicate with Andrew and Neil as well is that points like trust, points like building your confidence, perhaps helping you make decisions for yourself rather than and sort of having I guess a knowledgeable person to lean on is probably kind of some of the value that perhaps comes through, and that seems to be kind of what the message that I've got from the three of you. So thanks for that. I mean, we've got around about 12 minutes left. Haven't got a great deal of questions coming through on the chat just yet, so I'll keep this conversation going. And I know that Andrew will never forgive me if I didn't ask this question. Hence the prop of the skiing prop in the background. But one of the challenges I think that we all face in running businesses is kind of knowing when to switch off and knowing when to have some downtime. And I'll lead into you, Andrew. How do you manage your spare time? What do you enjoy doing, and kind of how do you think that then benefits you as a businessman?
I think it's very important to separate work from your social life, your private life. And probably when I was younger, again, it's probably a mistake I made when I was at work 6.5 days a week and the other half a day was spent playing rugby. I still play rugby. I'm 56. But I have lots of other interests, and I think it's very important to have other interests. The prop in the background is just happens to be where I store my ski mountaineering skis. So my main hobby, getting away from home and away from the business, is ski mountaineering, where I completely immerse myself in another environment with other challenges. And I'm too busy to think about work because I'm thinking about not getting eaten by a polar bear or something like that. But there are a lot of lessons you can learn from life about business from an adventurous lifestyle. Good planning can save your life and make life a lot easier for you. Trusting your colleagues is vitally important. And if you get in a mess, it doesn't matter how you got there or whose fault it was. Work out where you are, work out what your options are, pick the best one and execute it. And that's got me out of trouble on a mountain, and it's also got me out of trouble in business as well. So there are some analogies.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Neil, could I bring you in on that? And how do you spend your spare time? What do you enjoy doing? And how is it beneficial to the business, do you think?
Yeah, it's tricky actually, because quite often I'm guilty of it myself. I tend to check my emails out of work when on the weekend when maybe you shouldn't. But living where we live, we've got the mountains here, we've got the coast, so we enjoy walking. My sport is kayaking. I haven't been yet this year, but when it's fine weather, I'm out kayaking, sort of lakes and coast. Yeah, but it is important to switch off, and everything does still continue successfully with you without you there. So, yeah, you need to switch off.
Good man. Thanks, Neil. Adam, final words on that one?
Yeah, I'm in sort of the early stage stuff where it needs a lot of energy, and one of my biggest hobbies is growing plants and stuff. So obviously it's tricky to separate. But in terms of like downtime and changing stuff, there's a couple of things. Obviously, travel's big, and socializing, that's essential. I found like developing drinking red wine, that's a good one. I didn't used to like wine until I went to Italy on business, and had some amazing Vino della Casa Rosso. That's like a £4 jug of wine, and some very fun Italian friends that ran an olive farm. And one thing led to, we won't go there, but yeah, a lot of my interests are just reading about other types of science and opportunities, and thinking about business, and socializing. And with bloody lockdown, it's tricky because obviously we're cooped up in all the homes, and social stuff goes out the window. And this winter's been like quite bad, but well, for me, maybe I'm not the type of person, but just reading about stuff and learning more. Maybe I need to balance it out with some sports and stuff. Now that's better.
And why not? Okay, so we're getting that. That's great. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the session. There's a couple of questions coming in. So just before we open it up to questions, can I ask you each to briefly just share one lesson, possibly that you've learned along the way that maybe if you had your time again, you would do differently. Pass to you. Neil, can I pass that one to you?
Sorry, yes.
All right.
Yeah, really, it's like learn by your mistakes. Don't just keep your head down, carry on, think around it, and you get there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Adam?
I guess because it's early stage, so I guess just trust in yourself and intuition, and trust your gut. Your gut's your best guide and things. When it's difficult, it means you need to learn. If you don't know what to do, it means you need to learn more, and then make a gut feel. That's all I can add, really.
Thanks, Adam. Andrew, final word to you.
I've got thousands of lessons I've learned, mostly the hard way. Look after your good ideas. They're valuable. Look after your story. Work on your story. Learn how to tell it. Refine it. Live it. And keep on innovating. Keep on looking for the new. And the new can be anything. It can be growing dragon fruit in Yorkshire. It can be a slicker business process in your business that saves you half an hour of admin time a week. Just always keep looking for new ideas and better ways of doing things. And a mantra in our business: you can't manage it if you don't measure it.
They've said that they're coming.
You cut out there, Andrew, in the last bit.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think we've got a bit of background noise going on there.
So you can't manage it if you don't measure it. Would be a real good mantra to live your life by. Continuous improvement.
That's brilliant. Well, that's a great point, I think, to sort of conclude the sort of panel just part of the discussion on. And I'd say, thanks very much to the three of you for giving up your time to join us today. It's been extremely useful and extremely stimulating debate. I'm going to open it up to questions, and we've got one on the chat box that's come in from Chris Hemmings. What is the scope for local production post-Brexit and post-COVID era? So I think that perhaps touches on the value of obviously local food and the value of perhaps provenance. Could I open that up to you guys?
Neil's on mute but talking.
Here we go again. I've been also muted. Yeah, I think there's more scope for local production post-Brexit. Certainly in small scales and more localised. We found a lot of our smaller customers have been put off from importing now, just with peach procedures, phytosanitary procedures, and the cost of the transport. We've actually found ourselves growing a lot more and substituting what would have been imported before. So there's definitely more scope for local production. Also, this pandemic, as an industry, ornamental horticulture, we've been very, very lucky that people in lockdown on furlough have taken to gardening or buying plants. I believe there's over 3 million new gardeners were created last year during the first lockdown. So if we can harness, half of them, we've got a good future.
Yeah, no problem. So once they've picked it all up and collected it, I'll let you know.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil.
So it's the bank holiday.
Any further thoughts, Andrew, Adam?
Yeah. Sorry, Adam.
You're much more
go,
experienced, so I'll let you speak first.
You're probably going to say the same as me. I think technology has a big part to play in this. I think it is now more possible to do business locally. We do everything through supermarkets, but it doesn't stop me looking over the hedge with envy of some of my local friends who have developed farm retail outlets, growing their own stuff, selling it directly to the public, taking that retail margin, which is considerable. And they, of course, have the ability to tell their story very well. So I'm sorry I keep talking about the story, but I think it's so important. You know, I wouldn't want a slice of that. And I think with COVID, there's a relocalisation. With Brexit, there's a relocalisation. With the whole general direction of carbon footprinting, there's a case for localisation. So I think it's definitely an opportunity for smaller businesses to take it, and I would grasp it with both hands if I were you guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Adam?
Yeah, well, I think the British brand and Brexit, you know, and the sort of wartime spirit of COVID, that's not a war, but it's war on germs and stuff, has increased, you know, demand for UK stuff, UK produce. I think there was talk about a premium, like, you know, because of the tariffs and stuff on imports. I'm a bit out of loop on the stage of the Brexit tariffs. Feel free to step in, anyone, if they know. But yeah, self-sufficiency is very important as a nation. So, but yeah, the innovations that are making more types of crops available different times of the year, are obviously great. But yeah, local production and yeah, the value of the brand and the story, as Andrew said, like farm outlets is yeah, that's a big one, because you know, there's lots of farm shops that can you know, leverage smaller scale production, let's say, but focus more on the brand sale to generate revenue and stuff. So that's nice.
Thanks, Adam. That's really good. I mean, we are getting really short on time, and I know there's a couple of other questions in the chat box. I think what I'll do is, you know, I think we need to bring this to a close so we can close it on time. What I'll do is I'll forward the questions on. So there were a couple of other questions that came in by email, and I think they might be more specific to one or two of you rather than all three of you. So I'll forward those on, and maybe if you've got time just to reply to those on email, we can forward them back to the group. So yeah, just to say, look, guys, many thanks to you, Andrew, Adam, and Neil for giving up your time to join us today. And normally, if we were in a nice room, we could probably give you a nice round of applause, but it sort of falls a bit on deaf ears on a Zoom call. But I'm sure, on behalf of everybody here, I can say it's been an extremely stimulating debate. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. And like I said earlier, we'll be in touch with you all about the training and mentoring opportunities through the Leaders Forum. And I'll just pass back to Sarah now to close. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the panel, Ian, and everybody for attending. Absolutely great session. Really good to see you all. And we will see you soon. There is a link to the survey, as always. If you can fill that in, that's in the chat box. We'd be very grateful, because it does help us with our future planning. Super. Thank you. Take care, everybody.